It's right at 12 o'clock, and I know we're going to have more folks joining us and more folks watching after the call. So big thank you to y'all for joining live and being here right at 12. I figure we have some limited time and y'all's time is valuable, so we'll go ahead and get started. The way these college equity series sessions are set up is that we bring in a really wonderful guest to join us to talk about an issue that is critical to the field of college attainment and critical to the equitable landscape of the field and a creation of a more equitable landscape. So this is the second installment of this series that we're doing. We do them quarterly. This is our first year that we're launching this project. We're really excited to do it. Before we get started, I need to give a big thank you to Joanne Santavasi, who's on this call, who has been coordinating everything. You may have gotten emails from her. You may have gotten LinkedIn messages from her. She's the one who's been making all this happen. So a big thank you to Joanne for coordinating and running this. And a second big thank you to Carrie Warick, who's joining us on the call. So we have the absolute pleasure of being joined today for the second installment by Ms. Carrie Warick. She is the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the National College Attainment Network, and she leads NCAN's policy agenda setting at both the federal and state levels, and she oversees NCAN's advocacy work and professional development for NCAN member programs. I should mention that I was lucky enough to meet Carrie through NCAN's fellowship that they ran this past year, and she helped train me up and a couple college AIM students up on how to work in this advocacy field as practitioners in the advocacy field, and has been a wonderful guide for us. Her work also includes leading NCAN's successful push for Congress to pass the Fafsa Simplification legislation and overseeing management of NCAN's advocacy grantees. So we have an expert who we're talking with today. Ms. Warick holds a Master's of Public Policy with a concentration in education policy and a bachelor's degree in international affairs and history, both from the George Washington University. And while pursuing her master's, she was a presidential administrative fellow. So we have someone who knows this work well, who knows the policy field, and who knows how to create change in this field in ways to make this more equitable for our students. And I am so excited to be joined by Carrie. So I'm going to stop talking for a second, and I am going to, I guess I'll ask a quick question and let Carrie get started. But hopefully it's going to be less of me talking and more of hearing from someone who really knows what she's talking about. So before we even get into the policy and advocacy questions, Carrie, can you tell us about how you came to the college attainment world and why this work is really so important to you?
Only 18 months in, I'm still muted. Thank you so much, Sam, for having me today. I'm thrilled to join this conversation and get to talk with all of you. And College AIM has been a great partner on NCAN's advocacy work. So I'm thrilled to to repay that partnership here today. So I have kind of a typical Washington story where I started interning in college attainment, and that's really how I found the work. But I think personally, once I started working in the space and decided to pursue education policy as part of my master's for my next step, I had a lot of self-realization about both the things that I was privileged to have through my college going experience personally, and the things where I also lacked, and realized that in some ways my family can exemplify some of the stories we tell, with having one parent who went to college and one parent who didn't, and then watching kind of the trajectory of that messaging and that college going kind of culture messaging from within families. And how different that was on one side of my family from the other, and how that has affected multiple generations. And so that really brought me to the interest. I think I knew going into my policy program that I wanted to focus on domestic policy and kind of cause-oriented work, but then really just found a home in the education space as part of that.
Now I got to come off mute. Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Carrie. And yeah, it's interesting to think about kind of having both sides of the coin in your family and really be able to see both of those different trajectories that are created by by the legacy of going to college. As we pivot kind of to the NCAN side of this conversation, for those who are unfamiliar with NCAN, can you tell us a little bit about the organization?
Sure. So the National College Attainment Network started in 1995 with 9 college access programs who decided to build a professional community in this space. We were originally the National College Access Network. We changed our name about 2 years ago to reflect that we are now represent the complete pipeline. So NCAN as an organization we use the word network because another way to say it is that we're a mission-driven association. So we welcome all organizations, school districts, colleges, and other partners who are committed to our mission around closing equity gaps through college access and success, or the overall attainment network. So we do that through membership, which provides services for college access programs, school districts, and increasingly institutions as well, who are, working with us to close those equity gaps. We also work to achieve that mission through policy and advocacy change, which is the work that we're here to talk about today, as well as looking at the systems that are serving our students. So there's the direct service work and the professional development that goes along with that, the policy and advocacy arm, and then also the systems change work looking at districts and institutions. I'll make sure to touch at some point today kind of on some of the other services and things that folks can access through membership, but there are also many things that you can access without being a member as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And just from the member perspective, College Aim has been a member for a little over a year now, and we have seen so many opportunities to plug in and so many opportunities for the professional development of our team, and also for just opportunities for our students arise because of our membership. So the conference that we have been able to attend each of the past 2 years has honestly been the best conference and it's been virtual both years, but it's been the best conference that I've had the opportunity to attend in this field. The opportunity to be part of the fellowship has been great. We have a few members of our team who are applying for the next fellowship. I think it's Leading for Equity Fellowship that's coming up as well. So we really have been able to tap into these resources, and NCAN has markedly changed the way that College Aim operates and the way that we do our work. So we owe a big thank you, but also big plug for those who are not NCAN members on this call to join and take advantage of what's out there.
Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate the kind words about the conference, and I need to plug that our 2022 conference, which really better be in person, is scheduled for Atlanta. So we are coming to you and excited, and I'm telling you, it's going to be a big one, because the 2020 conference was supposed to be a celebration of our 25th anniversary in New Orleans. So that one went virtual. We were supposed to be in Denver this past a couple weeks ago, decided to take that one virtual as well. So I think Atlanta is going to be big and is going to have a lot of very excited people.
Awesome. We will be there, and we'll be among those excited for sure. Awesome. So let's pivot a little bit into the policy and advocacy conversation that we're here for today. So you lead NCAN's policy and advocacy work. So obviously you have the big picture vision here. Can you tell us about a few of the priorities that y'all are working on right now?
Sure. So we do both federal work and state work. So I'll start with the federal. I know we're going to circle around to state a little bit later, but a lot of NCAN's policy priorities are stemmed through the lens of college affordability and affordability for all of our students, as well as equitable access to higher education. So on the affordability front, we started cutting our policy teeth on Fafsa Simplification, got a big win with the Fafsa Simplification Act in December of 2020, and continue to work with federal student aid behind the scenes on implementation of that law, which we're not going to see in the field until October 1, 2023, but work is well underway to make October 1st, 2023 a success. Our other top priority right now on the federal stage is doubling the Pell grant. And we are working, focused on that based on our overall affordability work. So I have a number of links and things that I want to share today. So I think I'll pop the first one in the chat right now. So this is NCAN's college affordability work. We set a definition to measure whether public institutions are affordable for the average Pell Grant recipient. And we found in our most recent iteration that only 24% of public 4 years and just under half of public 2 years are affordable for the average Pell Grant recipient based on our definition. So you can check that out there. And you can also, if you click the second level menu there, you can download the Georgia state profile or the Pennsylvania state profile. I see Tom on. And we have all 50 states for others who are coming from outside of Georgia who I may not have met yet.
Awesome. So quick follow-ups on a couple different items. On the FAFSA simplification, can you talk a little bit about how FAFSA is being simplified and what we can expect to see down the road? Sure.
So a lot of the public conversation about FAFSA simplification is highly focused on how many questions are on the form. One of the talking points when the law was passed from Senator Alexander, now retired, who was the long champion of FAFSA simplification, was how it would go down to 36 questions. It's better, especially for those of you who have really been in the trenches on FAFSA, to think about that as 36 data element buckets. Where there are, there's a lot of focus on that number. I think the way that we have started to talk about FAFSA simplification is that it is a complete overhaul of the mobile experience, the source of information, and how the Pell Grant and how Pell eligibility is determined. So up to this point, the mobile FAFSA experience is really based on taking that PDF that fewer than 1% of FAFSA filers still use today and putting it online. And there is some skip logic, which is helpful, but we're going to see with this new law a dramatic change, I think, in the ordering of questions and the implementation of skip logic so that most students have a vastly shorter FAFSA experience. But if you still list out every question that's asked of any student, I'm not sure it's actually going to be down to 36. But the point is that just numbering the questions really no longer makes sense because students are going to be asked questions based on their situation. So that's the first part. The second part is that everyone will be required to use the IRS data retrieval tool, and the DRT will cease to exist as we know it. It will be automatic. There won't be, you're leaving the FAFSA and you're coming back and you have to do, it's and that change is actually one of the reasons for the delay, because they have to build a whole new central processing system at ED in order to be able to have that conjunction between, this is where you can tell I'm really not a tech person, between IRS and the FSA databases to make that automatic transfer work. And I think the two things to note there is, one, that will also work for non-tax filers. So the IRS will now confirm that a non-tax filer is a non-tax filer. And we are hoping, that we do not know, but it is our great goal that will then mean that students will not be selected for verification and have to do a verification of non-filer form because the IRS will be doing that automatically. There will still, and so really the only students who are probably unable and we're going to need some sort of other process are those with foreign income because that information does not live at the IRS. So if you're filing, if a student or a parent is filing foreign taxes, that's probably the only, as far as we know now, really the only exception. Everyone else will get automatic IRS data transfer. The other two big pieces, and I could go on for FAFSA for the whole time, so I will limit myself. But the other two pieces that I think are crucial to note is that the threshold for the simplified needs test, which will now be called exempt from asset reporting, is going to be increased and expanded. So it will go up to 60,000 AGI, but also if you are receiving one of a list of means tested benefit programs such as SNAP, you will also be exempt from asset reporting, regardless of your AGI, if you've otherwise qualified. It was our hope that anyone who had a means tested benefit would automatically get max Pell. We were not successful in that goal, but this exempt from asset reporting for means tested benefit is a big piece. And then the last part I touch on, and this is the part that I really think, is far beyond just the FAFSA filing experience. And for those of you who are advisors, is really going to have an impact, is that there will now be minimum and maximum Pell thresholds that are based solely on AGI and family size. And so the Pell eligibility calculation will now ask first, do you qualify for maximum Pell based on your family size and AGI? And if you do, that is basically the end of the calculation. You get your maximum Pell, you get a what is now going to be called a student aid index score of 0, and I mean, the information is also going to go over because states and colleges want to use it for their aid purposes, but in terms of Pell eligibility, that will be it. And I think the really crucial part about that is that Ed has been tasked with creating user-friendly tools that you'll be able to tell a student in 8th grade, 11th grade, 5 minutes before they sit down to fill out the FAFSA, yes, you are guaranteed a maximum Pell based on these 2 factors. And I don't need to do any math. I just know that. And then if a student doesn't qualify for max Pell based on those factors, they'll go through the process. They'll look at their student aid index, see if they qualify for Pell. If at the end of that calculation, they still do not qualify for Pell, they will then go through the minimum Pell test, which is another set based on your AGI and family size. And we expect to expand Pell eligibility to about 500,000 more students. So they'll be guaranteed minimum Pell. And, so minimum Pell based, probably $700 or so, depending on the year and the Pell grant. Hopefully we get some of these big bumps, so it'll be closer to 1,000 by the time this law is implemented. But I think the benefit there is, one, you can at least tell students you're going to get this much before you start the FAFSA. But second, if you have any other scholarship programs, if the institution has grant aid where Pell eligibility is required, the student will now qualify for that Pell contingent aid as well.
That's awesome. I think specifically that last piece that you talked about with just being able to quickly tell a student based on AGI and based on family size, if they're going to qualify for max Pell or how much they're going to qualify for, will be so critical. In Georgia, and particularly in the metro Atlanta area, we're working right now on a major push to increase FAFSA completion. And I think having that tool will definitely help as advisors or in schools working with kids to say, hey, you have access to $6,500 or hopefully by then more, just by completing this form and being able to give them the hard number right there and then, I think will definitely drive completion, both for students and also for families. So that's huge. One thing that you alluded to, you said, hopefully we'll see some of these big bumps in the Pell grant, and you mentioned earlier, the double Pell campaign is something I actually wanted to talk about next. So there's been a lot of talk recently about doubling the Pell grant. And also we've heard a lot of conversation about free college, and those to be kind of 2 different measures that could increase college affordability. I would love it if you could talk for all of us a little bit about where those proposals are right now, and kind of how NCAN and also you feel about those proposals as they stand. And as I ask that, if folks do have questions in the chat about anything we've talked about, or questions about anything we've talked about thus far, or anything else policy and advocacy related, please do jump in and drop them in the chat. We'll make sure we reserve about 10 to 15 minutes at the end as well for everyone to come off mute and ask their questions live. But if you have something you want to drop in the chat, we are all ears. So please do put it in there. And from there, I'll let you take it, Carrie.
Thanks, Sam. So I just popped another link in the chat as well. That's our federal priorities page. So you can see there's a link there for our Pell resources on double Pell. There's also a link on that page for federal state partnerships, which is the model behind the federal free college programs. So broadly, NCAN set a goal a couple of years ago when we really started focusing on college affordability and the college affordability definition that I mentioned earlier on, that it was our position that the Pell Grant should cover half the cost of tuition fees, room and board for an in-state student at a public four-year institution. And so that's our doesn't fit on a bumper sticker North Star goal of how we think affordability should be defined, and how we decide to pursue our policy work. And it's really around this idea of supporting a whole student and having a federal, state, and when appropriate family or federal, state institution, and when appropriate family partnership or grouping to cover college. And so for Pell Grant recipients, that if the maximum Pell Grant's covering half, then the state and the institution should cover the remaining portion. And so that's how we really approach this work. It so happens that when our affordability work and the double Pell movement both picked up steam, we're like, hey, double Pell is also 50%. So, that is the why. Like when people say to me, well, why double Pell? And I know there are one or two folks out there who've been talking about triple Pell. It's like, why double Pell? And our answer for why double Pell is because double Pell gets us to this 50% marker. President Biden has pledged a commitment to meeting that double Pell goal in several of his policy proposals and documents. And I think the piece with double Pell is that would I hope in the reconciliation package currently being debated in Congress that they would just double Pell overnight? Yes, that would be my dream. And I could say like, okay, I get to take a month vacation now. But that's most likely not how it's going to happen. And I've seen more and more talking points about doubling Pell to 13,000. I think it's most likely that we're going to get to this goal in fits and spurts. So double Pell is our hashtag and our bumper sticker. But that real goal, if we can achieve it over the next couple of years, is probably a Pell Grant that's about $13,000. And that represents about half of the national average for four-year public in state. So now there's free college. So there's and I'm talking very specifically here about federal free college. NCAN supports a federal-state partnership where the federal government uses its funding to incent states to keep the cost of public institutions. Well, I don't know, many states, I would say they're already not reasonable, but to either make them less or at least stable, and to incent at least level, if not increase state investment. That varies a lot depending on the state that you are in. So that is why NCAN supports a federal state partnership. And as such, no, Tom, the double Pell campaign is not over. Happy to talk more about that. And thank you for that question. Let me finish my thoughts on free college, and then I'll try to address that as I talk about how they overlap. So the free college proposal that is most readily being debated in Congress right now is called the America's College Promise. It focuses on community colleges and creating a partnership where the federal government provides match funding to states, depending on which version of the legislation you're looking at, depends on what states have to kick in order to be able to participate. But they all include a requirement that states are not allowed to decrease any funding below the levels that they've already been at. And that's really the crux for NCAN of why we support this. And so really, when you talk about the interweaving of these two proposals, there are some folks that are all double Pell, and there are some folks that are no, we have to have free college. NCAN's perspective is that we really need to support the whole student and focus on the full cost of attendance. Free college only covers tuition and fees. Double Pell, if you get 13,000, in a lot of cases, that's going to cover your tuition and fees, particularly at community college. But for those bachelor's degree institutions, that still doesn't leave a lot left for cost of living. And so we're looking at what combination of proposals allows us to complete that full picture. Is it double Pell and better SNAP access and childcare on campus? Or is it free college plus double Pell, because if you have tuition and fees covered, then you can use $13,000 towards cost of living while you're in school, or to pay the room and board part of your fees. So, I think from NCAN's perspective, we're really looking at how to bring those together. Now, I know, so right now in Congress, they're debating the Build Back Better Act, which is being moved through Congress by a process called budget reconciliation. And there have been a lot of media headlines about what is out of the bill. Unfortunately, free college has not been included in the compromise proposal because they were looking for they needed to basically cut the bill in half. Free college is a program that you can really only scale so small. And so they got to a point where they could not get the cost of that program down low enough and still do it well and still include it in the bill in competition with many priorities beyond education. For Pell grants, there's depending on House or the two versions of the bill, they're looking at putting a $500 or $550 increase to the Pell grant. I think the most recent it's $550, so we'll go with that. The most recent version of the agreement says a $550 bump to the Pell grant. This law is separate from the standard appropriations process that Congress needs to circle back to in December. Both the House and Senate education bills proposed in committee have $400 bumps. So if both of those bills get passed into law, we could be looking at a $950 bump starting next year for 22-23. And so that's where I say to Tom that the double Pell campaign isn't over, because we're just getting there incrementally, kind of under that header. My goal, I will be very happy come New Year's if we have a $950 increase on the books for next fall. And that will get us to about 36%, maybe 32. It's gonna, hold on, I just did the math. Yeah, that's gonna get us closer to a third, whereas now we're under 30%. So we're not at 50% yet. There will still be a lot of work to do, but we're gonna continue, we're gonna continue pushing at that. And we might need to do it $1,000 at a time. But we're going to keep pushing until we get, till we get to that equilibrium we're trying to find.
Awesome. Thank you for that thorough kind of explanation of how free college and double Pell could potentially come together. I think from our side of the work, we see so many students who need that holistic view of college affordability, not just to think about tuition and fees, but really to think about the whole picture. So thinking about these two potential kind of additions as stackable, and two things that could add on to really provide a fully more affordable college experience would be incredible. And the idea that Pell could be $950 more next year just makes me think about how many more doors would be open for our students here at College AIM. As we think about those national conversations, I also think a lot about college affordability at the state level as well, and I'd love to jump there next, Carrie. So in Georgia, one of the most important discussions around college affordability is related to need-based aid. And for those on the call who aren't as familiar with different aid programs, need-based aid is a grant program where dollars are provided, hopefully here by the state, to students purely based on how much money they need to pay for college. It's not based on merit, not based on grades, truly just purely based on financial need. Georgia is one of 2 states in the country without a need-based financial aid program, which puts our kids in a really tough situation. And I know that need-based student aid is one of NCAN's state policy priorities. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about what NCAN has been doing at the state level around need-based aid, because it's something that a group of practitioners, myself included here, are really pushing for right now. And we'd love to hear a little bit about a place where, or maybe some places where need-based aid is being done right, so we can figure out what ours needs to look like too.
So yes, need-based aid is one of NCAN's top state priorities, and really matches with NCAN's overall approach that the purpose of grant, scholarship, and financial aid in general should be to help students who would not otherwise go to college to access college. So we do that work on the local level by working with community foundations to help target their grants and scholarships to students who would not otherwise go to college, and build on that at both the state and federal level as well. So need-based aid at the state level varies greatly. Every state is different in how they run their state aid program. I believe, Sam, Georgia and Wyoming are the two states that do not have need-based aid programs. So all other states have need-based aid programs for their students, but they all vary greatly, and some of them have much better design than others. So if you're, really interested in digging into the weeds here, so I put our state priorities link there, so I guess two resources here. One is the Building Momentum at the state level. So this is where NCAN's state policy work is going. We commissioned the Education Commission of the states. We partnered with them to survey our members and to do some deep dives in 6 states around the country about where they see state policy going, need-based aid, and meeting basic needs. So back to that holistic support of the students' ability to go to college, and to also, focus on school once they get there because their needs are met, really was a running theme in those state reports. So you can see that on the state link I shared. And then the other piece I would share, which is also from ECS, but not at the behest of NCAN, but I'm so glad that they do this report and update it every year, is a look at, I believe it's the, you had said Wyoming, if we were mistaken about Wyoming. I'm also not so sure about New Hampshire, but some of them have some very small programs.
Yeah, I think it's New Hampshire.
Is it New Hampshire?
I thought it was New Hampshire as well, but the same report you just shared, Carrie, I was looking at.
Says it's Wyoming.
Says Wyoming. I've been saying New Hampshire for the last 2 years, and now I
I have a different report, Sam. We went through this last year with our impact report. I'll find it and show you.
Sure.
I can send it.
I'm taking your word, Corinne, and I appreciate you correcting that. Thank you.
If this were a state, and Michelle, thank you for that Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis report as well. So if I were helping you to design talking points to head up to the Capitol, what I would say is that you are very safe saying the vast majority of states have need-based aid programs. There are need-based aid programs that are well designed. There are need-based aid programs that are not well designed. And there are different ways to be not well designed. One of them is that many states have need-based aid programs that are underfunded. So for the students who get them, they work well, but there are many students who do not get them, particularly when that funding is first come, first serve, meaning you really need to fill out that FAFSA as soon as possible, because if you wait too long, all of the funds have been exhausted. Our member in St. Louis has done some really great features on the need-based aid and has fought the expansion of merit-based aid programs in Missouri. And currently Mississippi is proposing an elimination of their need-based aid program to combine it into a one grant program statewide that would, one, be less funding per student than the current need-based program, and two, would require would require a minimum ACT score, which just is very counter to the national conversation about the use of standardized tests right now. So lots of conversations in Mississippi about whether that's going to actually be proposed in a bill in January and whether it has any momentum. So those I would all say are on the don't list. The ECS report can help you find some other good examples, but the one that I'm following the most closely is Washington State. And I won't dive too much into details right now because I know that I am talking a very long time and Sam wants to get to your questions as well. But in Washington State, they just changed their grant aid program in 2020 to create the Washington College Grant. It is a grant for students who, so there's the link that you can read more about that, but for students under, I think AGI 56,000, it is full tuition and fees at both 4 years or 2-year programs. I believe, but I could not confirm this morning, that it is first dollar. Hold on, I emailed someone. I'm going to do a live email check. I haven't heard back from her yet. But I am fairly certain that that is a first dollar program, which means the tuition and fees are covered. And if the student is eligible for a Pell Grant, they get their Pell Grant towards their other non-tuition expenses. That program also includes apprenticeships and undocumented students. So that is the one that we are most anxious to see the impact that it has, and it best matches proposals from groups like NCAN and the Education Trust for what a state-funded free college program should look like. So I would definitely look to Washington State there. And then, yeah, I'll stop there because I know there are other topics we want to hit.
So I actually would love to kind of pivot to one quick question that I have and then open the floor up for everybody else. So I know that there are a lot of practitioners on this call and just college access and attainment supporters in general. So I'm curious to hear how they can get involved in advocacy work, or any suggestions you may have, any resources NCAN may have to kind of help push them and push us in the right direction.
Thanks, Sam. So I just shared our advocacy resources page, and this is a good time to kind of circle back to the things that we do broadly and then the things that we do specifically for folks who are members. So broadly, we have an Action Center page on there. Anyone is welcome to participate in the Action Centers. We send alerts out on Twitter and usually through our blog, which our blog is called as our news section of our website. That news section is always open. So I think the federal and the state tabs under those news sites are a great way to keep informed about what's going on. And our Action Center is always open. I think broadly, particularly if you're thinking in your personal capacity on your own time, do not be intimidated by your elected officials. You are their boss. You should be in touch with them. They all have email web forms. They all have phone numbers on their websites. I would encourage you, if you're hosting a FAFSA night, invite particularly your member of Congress. Senators are a little harder to get at those things, but invite your member of Congress to come out, and you don't even have to talk about policy or like directly say like, we're having a financial aid night. We'd love you to come, meet the families and see what we're doing. And it's a great opportunity for them to show that they're, out and about with their constituents. And then it gives you the opportunity to talk about the importance of aid. You can do that with state legislatures as well. It's a great way to talk about, the impact of the Pell Grant and the importance of need-based aid over merit-based aid. So, I would encourage you as a voter to get to know your members, your elected officials for your home address. Don't be afraid to call them. When you call, when you call a Capitol Hill office, you usually get a very junior staffer or intern who answers the phone and takes a message. And so you can just call, say your piece. They'll say we will be sure to get back to you and ask for some contact information. But the phone is definitely the fastest way. I would say broadly for your organization, though, a great way to get started is to invite your elected officials to come to either FAFSA nights or in the spring, if you do decision day type celebrations, that those are all really great ways to connect with them and then talk about which programs are most helping your students.
Awesome.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Sorry.
Yep.
I did talk about the member benefits side. On the member benefits side, NCAN runs a rapid response policy team. So if you really want to dive in deep, the members, I always encourage members to show up or to, I always encourage members to sign up on, hi, this is my first grader who's home today. I always encourage members to sign up for the Rapid Response Policy Team. My colleague Raymond will send you about 1 or 2 emails a month, really cued in to action opportunities, but that also can include things like media requests, witness requests on the Hill, etc.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. And if anyone has questions at this point, please feel free to come off mute and jump in, ask questions on anything we've talked about or any other policy pieces that that we haven't touched on. We'd love to hear your voice as well.
Good morning, Carrie. This is Tom. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to be seen and not viewed. Okay, so I am going back to the the broader double Pell. So we are signed on for double Pell. We haven't heard anything back since then. So there's not been any kind of like follow-up instructions. And then again, I got something actually from another webinar that said that campaign, that's where I was going, that the campaign pretty much had ended. So you're saying it hasn't. So who should I get in touch with to follow up? What should we be doing from a broader advocacy standpoint for double the Pell?
So Tom, thank you. That I would call that a coalition management issue and not a change or shift in priorities. So at doublepell.org, doublepell.org is a joint coalition that brings together the associations for colleges, as well as many advocacy organizations. And there is a live action center there that we anyone is welcome to sign up for and join, and having a long list of supporters there on that site is really helpful, particularly as we communicate with the leadership on some of the, these fast changing priorities. I would say that as the congressional negotiations have moved fast and furiously, and unfortunately have been happening way above the level of education staffers, mostly among leadership staff for Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Schumer, the 2 senators who have many, many requests about the package from the fine states of West Virginia and Arizona, as well as some key leaders in the House on both the moderate and progressive side, that that it's those very targeted offices that have been making all of the decisions, even far above the committee staff that we would normally work with. So that has led to some of the leaders of that group to have a more grass tops approach rather than grassroots, only because some of the turnarounds have been literally 12 hours. So the opportunity to reach out and have an discussion and then sign on, it's not been ideal, and this is not my ideal way of participating in the legislative process. So I will share that sentiment, Tom, and reach out about how to make sure that we are better in touch with everyone who is on that list. And I think this is a good moment just to mention also that NCAN will be running our annual Thankful for Pell campaign the week of November 15th. So anyone is welcome to participate in that. And we are building out our tools and website right now to get ready for that. It is possible that they pass the Build Back Better Act by then, but they've also missed about 5 target vote dates. So I don't know. But we are still going full force on Thankful for Pell and Double Pell on the week of the 15th, because the current appropriations short-term stopgap bill expires December 3rd. So if they do not pass new appropriations legislation by December 3rd, we will have a government shutdown. So we are pushing from NCAN, NCAN specific leadership for double Pell as part of Thankful for Pell the week of November 15th, because I know that they're not going to vote on the appropriations package until after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving never motivates them the same way that the longer end of the year holiday break does. So so I will take that back. But also this is a really great time to be in touch with your elected officials about the Pell Grant.
Thanks, Carrie. And I know we're running up against time here. I know we had initially scheduled for 12 to 12:45, just intended to be kind of a short lunchtime chat. So I understand if folks have to hop off right now. Carrie, I understand if you have to hop off, because I imagine you have something on the back end of this.
Oh, I peeled the orange, so I'm good now.
Okay. Well, that's multitasking at its finest.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So one quick plug I wanted to put in here as well is that there are coalitions working inside the state of Georgia to try to push for need-based aid. So there's a conversation that's been happening at the Smart Decisions Coalition with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. There's another conversation I've been lucky to be a part of with counselors from across the Metro Atlanta area, college counselors, folks from the college side as well, who are working to put together some legislation to be proposed in the next session here in the state of Georgia. So if there are folks in the state of Georgia who want to get involved, there are ways to get involved. I definitely encourage you to reach out to me or reach out to others who you know who are engaging in this policy work, because the more voices we have behind this, the better. It needs to be a coalition. It needs to be a broader coalition than just a few of us kind of working on it. And we would love to have more voices engaged. I imagine on the national stage, that's definitely the case too, but plug for the state side as well. Carrie, any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us, or anything else that we should be thinking about before we hop off today?
The one topic I mentioned at the very beginning that we didn't really have a chance to get back to is about access to higher ed for undocumented students. So one thing I just, and because I had my list of links ready to go, I want to put in this quick brief about the National Immigration Law Center, one of the leaders on immigration broadly, but also specifically in education access. And so this, I think the most helpful thing here for you all to check out as you might be advocating. I know Georgia has the least access, not just charging out of state, but actually banning students from attending your flagships. So I think the most helpful piece there, when you're engaging in these conversations, is the list of states that, one, grant in-state tuition to undocumented students, and then, which is nearly half at this point, and then two, a not quite as long, but still fairly substantial list of states that actually provide need-based aid to undocumented students who would otherwise qualify for need-based aid. And so I think the thing that really stands out to me from that list is that the states cover a wide variety of political spectrums. So Texas, for example, was the first state to create a need-based aid program for their undocumented students. And California is frequently pointed to as the leader, but my Texas members would want you to know that they were first in that front. So anyway, that was just the last resource that I wanted to share. And to also just mention in the Build Back Better Act, in addition to the $550 Pell increase, while that might have been smaller than we had hoped for with our goals, includes access to DACA and TPS students to the federal aid programs. So that is a big win for not for all undocumented students, but at least for students who are in the DACA and TPS programs. So that is a step forward on Pell access and access for those populations as well. NCAN has been less involved with that issue at the state level, but we have been pushing for access to the Pell Grant for those students at the federal level.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. And that's definitely something I didn't want to leave out here. I appreciate you circling back there.
Absolutely.
And for folks who are interested in figuring out how you can make an impact there at the state level. Freedom University is an organization here in the Atlanta area that is definitely a leader, has been a leader on the policy front as well as kind of on the direct service front. So I would definitely encourage you to look into Freedom University and see how you can support the work that they're doing. College AIM is working to figure out how we can get engaged specifically in supporting undocumented and DACA students in the coming year. It's a piece of our strategic plan that we just put in place. So we're trying to figure it out too. And if anyone on this call is interested in being a partner in that work, we are looking to find others who want to engage with us. So please definitely reach out to me and let's continue this conversation. Any other final thoughts before we hop off from anyone on the College AIM staff? Again, a big thank you to Joanne. I see that my other colleagues, Nyrisha and Dr. Sheffield, are also on here. So shout out to the whole College AIM team. But any other final thoughts, or should we go about the rest of our days and peel more oranges? Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining for the second installment of the College Equity Series, and a huge thank you to Carrie for joining us and sharing your wisdom. This has been really helpful for me, and I imagine it's been really helpful for a number of other folks on this call. So this has been great. College AIM will continue to do these College Equity Series installments once a quarter, so you can look out for the next one late winter, early spring from us. We'll probably be looking at February as our next session. That will also talk about policy. We're looking forward to talking about policy from a more specific Georgia lens, really diving into the local policy even deeper than we did here, and having some folks who are helping lead the policy discussions around need-based aid in Georgia on those calls. So we'd love to have y'all back. Carrie, we'd love to have you join as well at some point. Thank you so much for taking your time to share this wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me.